Hi and welcome to Linus Polygon Shipyard. Today we're going to be looking at a build report. I'm going to be building HMS Lively and the French frigate La Pomone, built in 1785. These are hulls that I received from my friend, so they are not commercially available. He made them from original plans and printed in 16K. I have that in an earlier video. So it's going to be the build report about those hulls, and actually I did the most I've done so far for any. Here I did a little bit of a stop motion. I just wanted to show the hulls off in action. I also did a battle report on this, so that will come later on. I think I decided not to have it in here as we're looking at this. So first, before we go into the actual battle report, I would like to give you some historical facts about these two ships. So if we start with the Lively, she was built in 1804 and was a typical 38 gun fifth rate of the British Navy. Typical for this type of ships was that they carried a main armament of these 18-pounder long guns. Lively was one of the most successful British frigates designs of the period, and there was another 15 ships ordered after the prototype. Captains and crew loved the sailing qualities of these ships, and just months really after launching, Lively participated in the capture of the Spanish treasure frigates of Cadiz in October of 1804, seizing the Clara, while the other ships captured additional vessels carrying gold bullion from South America. This is a very famous encounter, and I actually have a battle report on that. I'm going to link it here. Her career ended on August 20th, 1810, when she ran aground on rocks near Ponta Cura in Malta, and she was wrecked, fortunately with no loss of life. She was the star. I mean, there is so many ships in this class that were very successful, so all in all, a really good design. La Pomone, the French frigate, was a French 40-gun frigate. And she was built launched in 1785, and was a unique design by Baron Le Charles Etienne Bombelle, I think it was called. And she was actually captured by British forces under Captain Sir John Warren, and that was off Ile-de-Bath in April 1794. And what made her so special, I've talked about this in some previous video, was that at the time of her capture she was armed with 26 24-pounder long guns, which was for the time unusually heavy main armament. And also on top of that, she demonstrated outstanding sailing qualities in most wind conditions and was capable of exceeding very high speeds. The British were so impressed by her that they ordered new frigates to be built to her lines. And the first of these was the HMS Endymion, which is probably going to be my next build. I'll talk about that at the end of this video. The prototype launched in 1797. She wasn't an exact copy, but incorporated many British construction standards, like the stronger framing and so on. Remarkably, however, Endymion sailed even better than La Pomone, that she was built after, and was known as one of the fastest sailors of the age of sail altogether. There was 5 sister ships ordered, and they followed in 1813 and 14. And they were built mostly to counter the American heavy frigates during the War of 1812. So that was short on the history of these frigates. Always, when I start something like this, like a detailed build, what I do first is, of course, I read up on the history. I look at all the different sources I can find, like written sources. But of course, another important thing that you also have to always be a little bit careful with is paintings. And I found Antoine Roy, which is a frigate here by Roy, very informative. Like his paintings, he was known to be very strict and so on. So a lot of his paintings are really good as a base, I find, when I'm making my ships. And La Pomone's paintwork, there's no I didn't find anything like how she was actually painted. There's a painting, but I don't think that's very accurate. So I just went with some in between two paintings by Roy. I mean, so that's plausible on French frigates of the time. When I started out this project, and here you can see I'm using this AK deck tan and white to just paint the decks initially. I started out with a different frigate, and that was the Prosperine, but it was actually in her British refit. I found out a little bit later on. I should have seen it as well. So in this first part of the report, I'm actually building to her lines, and then later I'm switching out to La Pomone. So initially here, as you see the build report, and of course this is a straight on build report, you see me building masts to fit that other frigate, and of course Lively here, as can be seen. So Lively didn't change. So when I build, when I build these masts initially, I also got these fighting tops from my friend, but also I used to buy masts from Turner Miniatures and then cut them up and drill holes in them and basically do what's done here. Difference with my friend's fighting tops that he gave me is that the cheeks are in there already. This is typically a lineup of paints that typically be using different proportions of when I'm painting hulls and so on, different colors. Really like to use Jasper skin in there to warm some tones up and so on. I never use, I mean, some of you asked for like a formula. The thing is, I think at the time there weren't like a straight formula. It was not put down. So every ship would look a little bit different, and that's also what I'm going for. So even if I have this stripe, baby puke stripe on my ships, the British ships, it will always be slightly a different tone, some warmer, some colder, some lighter, some darker, just to get the variation in there that I think was historical. Of course, that's just my thinking. So for the masts for this build, I've actually used a converter. I'm going to put the link to it here. You need to run. It's a XML or like a and you need to run it with the script. So, and that script could be a little scary, but what it does, it just translates. I found like the lengths, it didn't translate perfectly to 1/700 scale, I feel like, but it helped me with building the mast. So that's what I used this time, but also the diameters. I think that was really nice. So I used it to convert real ships into 1/700 scale and try to get the mass a little bit more correct. And also looking a little bit more at how French masts were built, because they were a little bit different. So they're similar, but not exactly the same, especially the proportions of the yards and so on. It's a little bit different. So I tried to follow that for this build. I mean, I'm going to link the stuff down below so you can take a look at it yourself. So when I build these things, I basically use this gel cyanoacrylate glue. You saw a picture of it earlier. And you know, a pair of tweezers are always really good. I use these stands and I just have blue tack on there, so I just blue tack the hull onto the stand, and I have a handle that I can add the stands to, so I can just twist it around without twisting my hand as I'm painting and working on them. Once I have the hulls down with that tan and the white, and sometimes I have more white, sometimes I have some tone in there to make it a little bit browner, warmer and so on, I'll use some of that tone from Army Painter to just get the planking showing. So that goes into the deeper surfaces of the planking, and then that makes it pop. And here I'm working on the masts, and you see I'm using really thin copper wire to make the wire around, like those, it's not hoops, it's like the bracing, I can't remember the name, but to brace the mast. I think it turned out so on La Pomone. I wanted it to look like that French frigate that had thin lines and wide lines, and thin line and wide line. I think the thick lines became a little bit too thick. The thing is, sometimes you do things a little bit thicker at this scale, because then when you look at a little bit distance, it's going to pop in a different way. So I think the overall, and you will see, and then the overall impression turned out really nice. For my blacks, I usually start with a speed paint actually. So I'm using Grim Black from Army Painter. to get my base tone down for the black on these hulls. And then I'll go in with some other non-speed paints, like I'll lighten things up, highlight things with using white in the speed paint, or maybe just mixing it with some other non-speed paint black. Also getting the shades in there, and so I'll show you some ink that I'm using later on and so on. Here are the masts with some of the parts on there. You see I've put in the foot ropes here. They're from Atlantic Models. They've released them now, so you can get them from Atlantic Models. And here I've also put in the stripe. And as I said, I'm not going to give you a specific. I went for a look like the one on HMS Victory after they've redone that one now. So I tried to get that look on my stripe. Of course, you can never really see on the photos, even if I try to take good photos and good video here. It always looks different than in reality. And honestly, and this is not just me making it, they always look better in reality than they do on photos. But I hope it can convey some of the work I done. I painted those lines in by hand. I didn't mask things. I was thinking about masking. I know some of you guys do masking, while I feel like I just want to trust my hand. Also, in history, when they was painting those in, I'm sure it wasn't always perfect. I mean, it's before the age of full industrialization, right? Where everything is exactly the same. So that's why I try to do things as much as I can by hand to make them look a little bit different. Really nice touch here by my friend with the Lively. The letters of Lively popping at the back of the ship. And these are some ship boats. These are not made by my friend. They are mostly by Turner, some from some other maker. A little bit heavier than the stuff, I mean, for wargaming and everything, and also I guess for most dioramas this would be totally fine. Also the anchors, but they are a little bit thicker. I mean, they will pop, they will show better at scale. But if you want it exactly the right size and everything for a diorama and so on, maybe photo edge would be the way, or making your own. I see some people do that, which is fantastic. I haven't really tried that with the boats yet, but hopefully I might get some from my friend, because he's a really nice guy and he seems to enjoy to see me build with his stuff. So we'll see. He's made some boats as well, and but for a build like this, where the frigates are actually going to be part of a fleet and be used by someone in their fleet, I think doing it like this is fine. Of course, now I have a lot of boats on show here, and in my actual ships at the end I just used one for each, because I decided to have them all towing. So, and I didn't have a line run off the base, so there's just one boat towing, just to show that it's actually towing. So they don't have any boats on the on them, on the decks or on the davits or anything. They're all being towed, like they're ready for action here. And then here I took some videos in between here, just to show you at different points in the build here. I've added some red to the lids of the gun ports, so the inside of the gun ports. The outside is black. It's like a Nelson checker, right? But then the inside of the gun ports are actually red. I don't have the carriages red on the Lively, because and there's also a different way. I had a question about that recently, but I think, like, and also on the, if you look at the HMS Victory, after I did the how do you call it, reconstruction of her, like looking at the paints that were there before and so on. So they have those upper deck guns the same color as the, like, would be the baby puke, right? This ochre, light ochre. So that's what I ended up doing. And there you can see some speed paints. I also use speed paints when I put down the tone on the not the deck, but the other wood parts on the deck. I mix this hardened leather with some pallid bone and different parts depending on how light I want the parts to look. And I think that gives a really good base, and then you can go in and highlight, mixing white into it later or some other colors to get it warmer or cooler. And here are the colors that I used for getting the side of the La Pomone. I wanted that to be like this a little bit red, oxide, ochre, brown that you see on some era paintings, and also that I talked about in my video about the paint schemes, like the Nelson checker and so on. Seems like a lot of people like this, and I also do like it. I think it turned out pretty nice. Here, of course, it's early stage, so it's not really completed yet with the shading and the highlighting and so on. But I got that tone pretty much down, I think. Also, I chose to have the lower part of the masts in this grayish white because I found some sources for that, and also I found the painting by Roy, so which one of the two frigates that I was basing this off as far as the paint scheme go had that, so I decided to go with that lower part of the masts in this grayish tone. Then I have the upper part of the mast is the varnished wood, and then the yards and the tops and so on would be this black color, like the lamp black or whatever. And this is the tones I used for when I was painting in the stern gallery of La Pomone, which I chose to go with one of those frigates to have it a little bit more gilded. Like, she's a little bit older frigate, 1785, so I figured like maybe gilding was still a little bit in fashion at the time. So I decided to have it on La Pomone as well. It's a beautiful hull. It has a lot of similarities to Endymion. Now that I have the pre-refit Endymion and also the after the refit Endymion, the lines are very similar. Very fine lines. She has this weird little poop thing there at the back as well. It's like pretty unique. And also that you see the little I don't know what you call it, like almost like a cab, or it's like a covered thing there by the wheel on the deck. So a little bit different look, and I think again with the hull, my friend did a great job. So all I'm doing, trying to, with the masts and the scratch build of the mast and the rigging later on, trying to give these hulls as much as I can to kind of match his work. I mean, he needs to get a lot of credit for this because they were really amazing to build for. And another thing that I've been using lately is this silk span for the sails. I'm actually, for reefed and furled sails, I'll also use silk span. I'm actually trying to fold it like it would be folded in reality, which is really hard at this scale. I can't wait to build something in 1/350 scale, because I think then I can make it hang more naturally. In the end, I kind of like the result the most. I like it more than something like 3D printed or in plastic or so on, or even in papyrus. The papyrus turned out really nice too when I tried to do that. But I think for my favorite right now, or my go-to, would be this silk span, and I wasn't happy with it in just one layer. So, and I've used it for a couple of builds. I used it for the Surprise and the Acheron as well. I actually layered it 4 layers and tinted it slightly to make it a little bit worn. I figured like sails would be some of the things that would probably be wearing quickest on a ship at this time, right? Because it's up there, it's canvas and it's exposed to the elements. So I tried to get that look in there. So I've put on the lifts here. Looks pretty yellow, the color I chose for the running rigging on La Pomone in these photos. But when you look at it in reality, it just really looks like a really nice warm tone for the ropes. So, bear with me there. So I started to put in some more details. Have that canvas covering of the hammock netting on Lively. It's not shaded yet here. I just put it in roughly, and it's not either like it's pretty square so far. But I'm getting to aging it a little bit later on. Putting in crow. Mostly, when I do that, I have them usually just arming one side of the guns, like they're fighting one side at a time. Mostly also because otherwise there's just so many figures, and it just looks a little bit too crowded almost when I did that on both sides. So put some crew up on the ropes, in the foot ropes up in the yards as well, like working the rigging, and of course Marines, blue for French and red for the British, up in the fighting tops, necessary, I think. And maybe some also the La Pomone has some Marines down on the deck. And here's the stern of the Lively. I fixed that a bit later on. I see I messed up a little bit the E, or the E was a little bit not as sharp as the rest, so it became a little bit fuzzy here, but I fixed that pretty much at the end, I think. And also you can see La Pomone stir there. I'm really happy with how the gold, I put in some hand painted gold work there on both sterns, and I think that turned out really nice. I mean, on photos again looks so compared to in reality, where you just have it moving a little bit. I think the videos conveys that a little bit better. So I just decided to do a little bit of a spinny. We're far from done here. I started to do some highlighting and so on, getting some more details in. The crew is a little bit more in and so on. I highlighted and shaded some more on the band. And then I've painted in the cannons as well here at this point. I'm also using this dark irony tone speed paint. I think I'm going to put it in here in the video somewhere, so you can find that too. Also from Army Paint. I find those speed paints pretty good for some stuff, because they kind of give you a two-tone thing to start with, and then you can go in and shade that further or highlight further as you want. But it puts in a good base. Be careful with your brushes though, because those paints, the speed paints, they really eat brushes. So you just have to keep that apart from your really nice brushes. Use some not so expensive brushes, because they're gonna eat through the brush even if you clean them. And you have La Pomone here. I did add a few details to these ships. I think my friend did a great job with all the little details already from the beginning in the print, but then I just wanted to add some more details myself, like I showed on the picture earlier, the stairs on La Pomone, like leading up to that little weird poop at the end. And so I'm not sure this is historically correct. I'm not sure if there was some kind of access up there like that, but I just wanted to have it there. So I kind of scratch built, handmade that from brass. Used some photo etch, and then got the stair in there to just give an access up to that, so I could have the captain standing up there. And you can see also the crew. I paint them. They come painted from Edward usually when I get these photo etch screws, but the colors are wrong, so I just go in and paint them, and that's a very tedious job. Takes quite a while, but just to match a little bit more era look. And here you can see they're nearing the time for putting in the standing rigging. The masts are in place, and hopefully the heights look kind of correct. I went from those measurements in that file I'm linking here. So maybe you can give it a try yourself if you feel like building masts. Building mast, of course, always. I'm not happy just with the glue. I always make sure that I'm putting those stops in there on top and so on. So there's more points where it's glued, and it's also small wires around it just to hold it together, so they don't just break too easily. Of course, if you're doing like me and doing all the rigging in brass, I do both my standing and my running rigging in brass. I'm not using any rope or what do you call it, like thread in this scale. I'm just going with just brass in different diameters. So starting with 0.3 for some of the thicker standing rigging, maybe even 0.4 for some really thick standing rigging, which is probably too thick, but I just need the difference. I also wanted to do some more, as you can see here, front of Lively, like looking at the paintings and so on, and also here on Pomone, like some of those in the standing rigging, like make them a little bit thicker, or like make them look like they look on the paintings, like with the different way it's threaded. So standing rigging more or less done on Lively at this point, and this also stabilizes the whole ship quite a bit. I mean, it can still break, but even if it breaks, it will kind of hold together, because it's not wire, it's not thread, it's wire, right? So the wire will help the model keep together. And here we have La Pomone in the same state with the standing rigging in place. And I started to look a little bit at some of the running rigging here. I mean, you know, I'm not a historian, as I always say, remind you guys, but I just like them to be as accurate as I can. And I do forget stuff and so on always along the way, but I think mostly both these builds became quite successful. And of course, you know, at this point it looks like a little bit awkward without the running rigging, with just the standing rigging. I think once I now got used to just having the running rigging in there as well, just having the standing rigging, I feel like that's not enough. I have videos on all this stuff, more or less. I mean, of course I'm doing a little bit more advanced nowadays, but if you want to get started with this stuff, then there is videos out there that I have made, and I'm sure others have made too, but that you can use as a base to get started. If you want to rig your ship, I mean, I have a video on rigging airship where I go. It's a little bit easier. I'm using threads in that one as well, but it's more like for your tabletop wargame. Of course, these are tabletop wargame, but they're almost. I mean, I hope like you feel like me. It's diorama quality. So, and they're really time intensive. If you want to build a fleet like this, you'll be at it for years. Really, honestly, because they do take a lot of hours. So I started putting in the sails now, and the sails there are, as I said, silk span, 4 layers glued, and I draw some lines on there and so on. Some of those lines, I don't know, like I could probably go more, like I've done more, but I just feel like when it becomes too perfect, and it looks harder, like when you're looking at a distance, the brain like gets drawn to it. So I keep it really simple. I mean, I'm hinting at the detail more than I'm drawing the actual detail in there on these cells. I think it turns out pretty okay when you're looking at a little bit of a distance, or looking at the model live and not in a photo. So starting out with the running rigging, so I've used both brass and some copper wire. I use 0.1 millimeter copper wire and 0.05 millimeter brass, mostly for the running rigging. And what the copper wire does is, of course, it marks some of those lines a little bit more, being thicker, but also the copper wire, it lets you shape it after. So if you want some sag in your wires, or you want to build on other wires on them, then it's starting with that thin copper wire could be a thing. You see here I've gotten most of the running rigging in with that 0.05 millimeter brass, and this was, I can tell you, madness. I mean, I go crazy when I do this. This is the most I've done so far. Of course, this is not the whole running rigging. You could probably do it, but I think it would almost look too busy. Like I think this is a good middle way. And of course the blocks, I put the blocks in there, but I just use a thin dab of cyanoacrylate glue to replicate, or to make it look like the blocks, and I then paint it with some speed paint, some leather brown speed paint, to just get it looking like a block, more or less. So just showing off the model here from different angles, getting closer to done. always go back at this point, go over it with a brush, looking for seeing if I'm missing something and so on. Usually we're all just human, and I always miss something, so I'm sure I probably missed some stuff on this model as well. I really like also not having all the jibs up, but maybe have them like, furled a bit, or I don't know if you would call it furled on the jib. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Not furled, but reefed or pulled down. So that gives it a little bit like look like more like you're in action here. Here's like a little bit of a close up on that. Of course, it's not shaded or highlighted fully yet, so it doesn't have the full depth yet. Pretty bland in this light as well. This becomes pretty strong, my lamps, when I film under them. So I think it's since I swapped to that box where I have all my paints, it becomes like a dark background. And then the cell phone camera, I did all this on the cell phone camera, has a tendency to make things too like overexposed. So it's too white here. This is not the way it looks in reality. I put in the ensign and the pennant. For Lively, if I understand right, she was for a while under an Admiral of the Red, right? So red is plausible. Also on independent command, ships would have a red ensign. Commissioning pennant, I'm not sure. Like, there's sources that say that it would be a tricolor one, and then some sources say that they probably have the pennant from the last command they were under, but that the ensign would be red. But just to be sure, I also like the color of that red ensign, so I tend to go with red ensign. And of course, once I have them up, I'm gonna go in and put in some darker tones where it fits, and highlight and shade, and just make it pop. And here you can see the effect. I'm using the outside light. Was a bright winter day, very cold, minus 17 degrees Celsius here, very cold for being south of Sweden. But the light showed why I like the expansive ones, because it has that ability to let the light shine through like a real sail would, I think. And here I've put on the base, and you see when I put this stuff down on the underside, I use that a mix of some speed paints, some green and some blue speed paint, and also a turquoise ink that I really like a lot. And it becomes semi-transparent, and I paint that on the other side, and I don't make it even, so it varies the tone. And then on top I use this splash gel, like I showed you, and at the end I'm going to use the seafoam. I haven't used it yet here because the splash gel is still drying, and as you see when you put it on, I mean, the splash gel looks like doesn't look good initially. I think it needs to dry up, so it dries up clear, and it's going to make the top side pop and let some of that light through from the underside. And here you can see it's dried up. I also decided to put in a little bit more blue on the underside. I thought they turned out a little bit too green, so I just went back and gave it a thin layer of blue on the underside to blue it out a bit. And here I've put in that sea foam texture, and that's just go by hand and do what you feel looks right. I always try to have my ships look like they're healing a bit, and they're being pressed by the canvas, and they're reacting a little bit to the sea surface as well. So I have the Pomone, she's like making a turn, so the wake is not completely straight, and then Lively is just going straight ahead over the waves here. And of course I haven't put in too much waves. The surface is pretty flat, so it's a pretty calm day, but I think for just a model for the table, this looks best. And I used this square or rectangular bases this time around. So a couple of images of them being more or less ready with all that, so you can see all the detail in that running rigging, how thin that really is. It's like working with hairs and the blocks and so on, and how they look together. Of course, you'll never look this close. You need a loop or enhanced glasses or really good eyes and looking super close to see all that detail, like how I have them here on my in my light box is more like how you would see them on the table. Like most of the time with my bad eyes, I don't see. I put in the crew because I like to have the crew there. But when I'm playing, 99% of the time I don't even see that they're there. So, but it's the knowing, right? The frigate has a crew. I think the end result speaks for itself. I hope you guys agree. Always put down a lot of work on getting the ensign and the pennant just right, like bending it with a brush, like over the handle of a brush, to make it bend nicely, and then sealing it and make it with some lacquer and stuff before painting it, to just make it stiff enough to keep the shape. And so some final shots of HMS Lively and La Pomone as they are looking finished. Just this pair, they went on as I said, on a commission. The guy is very lucky because he's getting these hulls. I mean, this one really hurt. I put down so much time, and I put the most time I've ever put, and all the rigging turned out. I mean, the running rig, I think it turned out spot on. I'm super happy with the running rigging, but it was so much work, and so it actually hurt a little bit to send them off. I would really like to have kept this for my own fleet. So definitely in the future here, I'm going to be winding down on the commissioning, I think, because I just I want to build this stuff for myself. I want to make dioramas. I want to build some ships just for myself, so I can enjoy them and play games with them, like I also enjoy doing. So, but before I sent this off, I managed to just have a small game played using beat to quarters rule set, and I'm probably going to put that up as a short or a little bit longer format, but maybe 5 minute, 10 minute short battle report of the results of that battle. Between, of course, it completely fictional, because by the point Lively was off the docks, then of course La Pomone was already captured by the British and was in British hands. So it would be a fictional duel, these two ships meeting. But really, I think they represent really well both the British ships, with the Lively being such a standard and successful British ship, and then some of those French more one-off designs with those sleek hulls, but also Pomone inspiring a whole line of British frigates, turning out to be some of the fastest ships, fastest sailors around, and also being able, even though there was some problems having those heavier guns on the frigates, I mean, that wore them down quite a bit, but they were on there. They were, I mean, some of these larger frigates, these 40-gun frigates, were armed with those 24-pounders, just like the American large frigates were as well. So I just wanted to show you how I do when I ship this stuff. I've had problems in the past where they would break loose. I had them with magnets and some padding around, but nowadays I just have them in their own box like this with a magnet. So it has a neodymium magnet on the base of the C base, and then I also have those cardboard strips glued with some really strong super glue in there. So the actual model is not glued anywhere. You can just take off the cardboard strip and you can remove the model, and it's been working out the best so far. I have those small boxes then packed into a larger box that is padded, so, and that keeps them alive. They're not touching anything except for the base as they're getting transported. I have a small short video up, or actually a post up, asking you what you would like me to build next, and I showed a picture of, looks like right now, looks like you guys want me to build the Endymion, so that's probably what I'm gonna do. And until the next time, and if you have any questions on this build, of course, in-depth questions on, I do have a lot of tutorials up now, but if there's any specific particular you want to know from this build that I didn't answer, I mean, I know I'm pretty generic when I talk about this stuff, so if you want something particular answer, just ask away in the comments below. I try to answer it. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It's grown. I mean, it's quite a large channel for being a niche, I think, at this point. I'm very happy to have the conversation with you guys, and that you like to. It inspires me to talk to you, gentlemen, and it really makes me happy when people find the stuff I do useful to their work as well. So next one, probably battle report. And until then, I wish you fair winds and following seas.